I want to welcome you to the Pro Mindset Podcast. The Pro Mindset Podcast is all about diving into the headspace that results in championship performance. High-performing athletes, winners, have this mental flow and have a positive headspace for their performances and success. Join me, Craig Domann, sports attorney and NFL agent, on this podcast. I will interview pro athletes, college athletes, football coaches, and sports personalities. Together, we can discover how you can get in the flow and have your own pro mindset. Okay, today on Pro Mindset Podcast, we have a 2020 NFL draft prospect, quarterback prospect, Nick Tiano, Tennessee-Chattanooga. Nick is a former Mississippi State signee, transferred to Tennessee-Chattanooga, was selected to play in the 2020 NFLPA game last month, went out to Pasadena, California, and won the MVP of the game. And so today we're going to get to know Nick. We're going to get to know his history, some of his dreams, how he sees the quarterback position, how he sees himself in the NFL this year. And so I want to welcome Nick Tiano to the show. And Nick, we're going to get started with, just kind of give us a preview of what your origin of football is. Was it something that you picked up in high school, something you've been doing since you were a kid? Take it away, Nick.
Yeah, so I, obviously growing up in the South, football is huge. My dad has been a huge sports fan his entire life, especially football. I grew up loving the game, playing Madden, NCAA, all that stuff on the PlayStation, obviously, and grew up a huge Pittsburgh Steelers fan, West Virginia fan. My dad's from up that way. I had every Steelers quarterback jersey, every West Virginia quarterback jersey. I got all that stuff at home. Peyton Manning, I had to have everybody's jersey. I always just loved it. When I was young, I guess, my dad and mom decided when I was in third grade, I was old enough to start playing. I'd always played basketball and baseball leading up to that. And they finally let me play in third grade. So in third grade, I went to play. They had a weight limit to play quarterback. It was 85 pounds, and I was like 88 pounds. So my first year, I had to play tight end, and I hated it. But came back the next year, was able to play quarterback. Been doing that ever since, and I just loved it. I've always loved the game. I've always loved watching, playing, really college and the NFL. I've always loved watching great quarterback play. Like I tell people all the time, when I was a kid, I hated Brady just because I feel like everybody did, back then when he was winning all the time. As I've gotten older, I grew to just appreciate all those guys. But, I've always just loved it. That's really all I've ever wanted to do is play football. It's been my favorite sport really since the beginning. I've always been a big fan of the game and always enjoyed playing it.
Now, you from your family has a heritage in West Virginia. I know your father's from West Virginia. What was it like growing up, rooting for West Virginia, and kind of describe for everyone how important football is to your family?
My favorite from West Virginia was probably Pat White. I definitely can't run like he can. I always loved Ben Roethlisberger growing up, but those guys before him, Tommy Maddox, and those guys were always fun to watch. But really, as I got older, I always loved the Steelers. That was my dad's team, but I've always just liked watching great players. Like Peyton Manning has always been a favorite of mine, especially being from Tennessee, so big down here. I love Tim Tebow. I've got a fat head of Tim Tebow on my wall at home, in my room. So I was a huge fan of his, just the way he played, the passion he played with, the way he led those guys. I've always loved just watching the great one. Even today, if a good quarterback's playing, I love to sit down and watch it. And it's kind of the same way when I was young. I really didn't care. I never was a diehard. Those were just kind of the teams that my family supported, but I've always just loved watching really all those great ones play.
Sounds good, my man. Nick, how would you describe your attraction to the quarterback position? What drew you to playing quarterback?
Yeah, no, I always wanted to play quarterback for sure. Growing up playing in the yard with my buddies, I was always playing quarterback and always, playing out in the front yard or in the street or whatever. I was always a guy that was playing quarterback. I just always loved the position. I love throwing the ball. I pitched in baseball. I don't know, something about having the ball in my hands. I always liked, people always give quarterbacks a hard time. They say you want attention and all that kind of stuff. That was never really it for me. I really loved the position and loved the way you play, kind of the mental aspect of it. What it takes to be a leader and be a great quarterback. I've always appreciated and respected and kind of wanted to work towards being those things. And I just loved it from an early age, really.
Nick, how important is football to your family, to your dad, to your mom?
Yeah, so growing up, my dad always coached me. And like I said, I always loved it. So, I'd get on YouTube and I'd watch Peyton Manning highlights, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, all these guys, get on when I was a kid, watch their highlights. Always wanted to be like those guys. Like that, I kind of was just able to pick some things up, from my dad, just being a fan and knowing the game, and then kind of what I did on my own, watching on the internet, and tried to pick up everything that I could.
Hey, Nick, you were kind of a hotshot quarterback coming out of Baylor High School there in Chattanooga. Share with everyone what your high school recruiting experience was on your way to college.
Yeah, so like I said, I grew up a huge West Virginia fan. I think that's kind of where I always wanted to go and play. It was a long way from home, but I've got a lot of family up there. So that was definitely my dream. I didn't get offers until a little later than a lot of guys in my class. For whatever reason, kind of, I guess after my junior season, in January or February, I got my first offer from the University of Miami, and then kind of took off from there a little bit. Vanderbilt was recruiting me really hard. Obviously, then Mississippi State came in, Ole Miss, Tennessee. Most of these SEC schools around here, some ACC, Duke, North Carolina, Wake Forest. West Virginia did recruit me. Louisville, really all these schools down here in the Southeast started recruiting me, but really it came down to Miami and Mississippi State, and then I committed to Mississippi State, and then actually picked up a couple offers after I committed. But my dad, he was a big influence on me, and I kind of believed in it as well. When you give someone your word, you should stick to it. So I really felt comfortable about the situation in Mississippi State, and felt confident in my decision. So I stuck with it, but I was probably recruited harder after I committed there than ever before.
So talk a little bit about your experience, your relationships, and the competition and the situation at Mississippi State.
Yeah, so Mississippi State was a great fit coming out. It was close to home. In the SEC, it's conference I always, grew up wanting to play in. It was a great situation because I was going there. Dak Prescott was coming back for his senior year, so I knew I was going to redshirt and then have a chance to compete for the starting job the following year. And really, that's all you can ask for. As a redshirt freshman with a chance to play, that's as good a situation as you'll really find. So, came in the first year. It was a great coaching staff, great facilities, great fans. It was awesome. I had a great time, great teammates, and got to sit and learn from Dak, which was probably one of the most influential experiences that I've had in my football career. Kind of getting to see how a guy like that goes about his business, the way he prepared, the way he led, the way he performed. I was able to take more from that than he probably even knows, and especially being young, 18 years old, it was just a huge experience for me to kind of see how this is supposed to be done. And, you see the success that he's had. Obviously, he does it the right way. So that was huge for me. So redshirted, took everything I can from him, prepared myself, thought I gave myself the best chance to start the next year. We had the competition. Obviously didn't go my way, but, I had a great experience there. Those people down there are great, and, I'm thankful for it. But no, I enjoyed it. It was a good time.
Okay, Nick, when you were at Mississippi State, you were in the same quarterback room with Dak Prescott, who's everybody knows now is the starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. Describe what type of player and person Dak is and what kind of relationship you had.
He's the best leader I've ever been around. The guys in that locker room would have run through a wall for him. He was the hardest worker in the room, which everybody respects, obviously. And he kind of just set the standard every day with his attitude. Dak never had a bad day. He showed up the same guy every single day, and he worked his tail off, and everybody followed. And we had a lot of success. And that's kind of the model that I've tried to follow. He wasn't extremely vocal. He was the same guy every single day, treated everybody great, always had a positive attitude, and he always believed that he was the man and we were going to win every game we played. And the way he carried himself, I think that just spread throughout our entire team.
Very good, very good. Okay, so Nick, kind of describe for everyone, why did you choose to transfer from Mississippi State? Obviously, in the college football landscape today, everybody looks up to the SEC. Certainly, everybody wants to go Power 5, but within those 65 schools and those 5 conferences, there's the SEC that's kind of at the top of the ladder. You had an opportunity to be at Mississippi State, play at Mississippi State, and you decided to move in a different direction. Describe to our audience what was your mindset when you decided to transfer?
Yeah, so obviously had the competition. Felt like I had a chance to play. Definitely going through the season, we had lost some games. I was kind of being patient, waiting for my opportunity to get in there, and unfortunately, it just kind of never came. They felt pretty confident in the decision that they made, and the staff pretty much went all in on developing the other guy, and so it was a tough pill to swallow for sure. But I decided probably towards the end of that season, it was, if I wanted to play, I was going to have to transfer because there was only 1 year separating us, and I didn't want to sit there and watch somebody play. I put too much into it to do that. So, at the end of the season, when I got my release and started talking to schools, and Chattanooga it was an easy choice because coming back home, I knew that I would be happy. I love Chattanooga. My family, my friends, the support here was going to be better than anywhere else. The big thing for me was playing immediately. If I were to transfer to an FBS school, I would have had to sit out a year. And then, you never know what happens after that. That's tough to do. So for me, I was able to come back, eligible to play immediately in a great city with my family, my friends, my support, a great university, kind of checked all the boxes for me. And really a great program. They just come off of winning 3 conference championships in 4 years. And, they were really a program headed in the right direction. And it seemed like the perfect fit for me personally and as a football player.
How would you describe the thing that you learned the most, the so-called life lesson that you got from making the transition from SEC to FCS?
No, I think that was probably one of the biggest turning points in my life, honestly. I went from, being 19 years old, thinking that I'm going to win the Heisman Trophy, to, taking 5 snaps the entire season and having to transfer. It was a very humbling experience, especially because, I put everything I had into it. My mind and my heart was set on being the starting quarterback at Mississippi State. And while I would have loved that experience, I'm thankful for the way things have gone because I think it's made me the person I am today. Dealing with that and having to overcome that, it was tough for sure. It tested me a lot to go through that. It was tough. It was tough showing up to work and practice every day down there, knowing I wasn't going to play, and going through that and those feelings at a young age. I really do think it shaped my mind and it made me grow. And, like I said, I think it changed my life. The way that I deal with adversity and the way that I can go through things now, I think that experience really shaped the way that I feel and the way my mind works. I think I matured and grew up a lot in that time. And it also made me appreciate things, like playing isn't a privilege. It made me love the game. Like I expected to play down there and I didn't. And I had to go through what that felt like to sit there and watch somebody else play. And it made me appreciate the game again, and realize how much I loved the game and how bad I wanted to play. And I think, it was a huge moment in my life. And like I said, as much as I would have loved to play down there, I'm really thankful for it because it really made me who I am.
Nick, I've gotten to know your family, and they are football lovers. Share with the audience a little bit about your family's love for football.
Yeah, being in the South, football is huge. We're right in the middle of SEC country and all that. So football is huge down here for everybody. My family, like I said, my dad is a huge sports fan, loves football. My mom she loves football. Obviously, she loves watching me play more than anything. But no, it's huge. I mean, everybody down here loves watching football. It's a big deal to everybody. They love watching games on Saturday, our games. Everybody else. There's obviously a huge culture and a lot of football fans down in this area.
Okay, Nick. So as a quarterback, you get to have the ball in your hand all the time, and you have a lot more control over the flow on offense than most players. What do you love the most about playing quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, I just love the game. I love watching football and studying football. Playing quarterback, you got to know what everybody on the field is doing, and I kind of like that mental challenge to play in the position. Every week it's like studying for a test, and you've got all week to prepare. And, Saturday's test day. And, you just gather as much information as you can throughout the week, watching film and seeing tendencies and what they like to do in certain situations. And I think that mental side of the game is just super intriguing and challenging to me. And I love that every week. Every team is different. Every defense is different. So, you're really tested every week. And also I love the leadership aspect of it. Being a quarterback, you got to be the leader of the team. And, I love being in that role and leading guys and pushing guys, and kind of setting the tone for the team. And those are probably the two biggest things and two favorite things about it.
During the season, obviously you've got obligations with academics and you've got the student athlete title, and there's the student part, but there's also the athlete part. Kind of describe, how much did you watch film and how did you watch film and what did you get out of watching film?
Yeah, I usually like to break it down by situation and formation. So, I'll go through and watch all the first down plays, see kind of what their tendencies are on 1st and 10. And then I'll go and watch second long, second medium, second short, kind of see what they like to do on those downs. Then obviously 3rd down is a huge one. 3rd down in the red zone as a quarterback, it's kind of where you're judged as a player. So seeing what they like to do in those downs and distances and, 2-minute, what do they like to play in 2-minute? I think that can give you a lot of answers because defensive coordinators usually have something they like to go to on 3rd and long or, red zone, 10 and in. They have their coverage or their scheme that they like to roll with in those situations. So a lot of times you can pick up on that in the week. You'll know what to expect on Saturday. And then, kind of same thing with formation. What do they like to play to trips? What do they like to play to 2x2? If you get under center and pack it in, what are they going to do? I think, you can just, like I say, you can give yourself the answers to the test before you go play on Saturday and have all that knowledge in your head and kind of just know what to expect pre-snap, and it slows the game down a lot. Yeah, I mean, in the season, it's definitely just opponent film and practice film, but all off season, I like to study NFL tape and watch the quarterbacks and see what they're doing, their technique and their footwork and those things. But really just see the schemes. I think it's cool to watch different offenses and see the difference in, what does New England do versus Kansas City or those kind of things, and kind of pick up on how they're doing things, the success they're having, how the quarterbacks are playing. I think the offseason is a great time for those kind of things.
So when you're talking, Nick, when you're talking about football, there's lots of different offensive schemes. Even in the NFL, there's a handful of different schemes. What is your favorite offensive scheme?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, because I think a lot of teams, like the Chiefs and the Patriots, that like their schemes are going to be very different based on the personnel they have. The Patriots don't have Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins and these guys on the outside, so they kind of have to do some different things. I like, the Patriots do a ton of shifts and motions to get matchups and get guys in the spots they want, especially, on 3rd down. They'll move Edelman around, or they would move Gronk around to get him, to get a matchup they like and kind of work those one-on-ones. But really, I think everybody brings something to the table. The Rams do a lot of great things. The Chiefs do great things. The Colts are really, really fun to watch. It's tough to pick one scheme. Everybody pretty much does the same stuff. Football is football. Kind of just get into it a different way. But, I don't know that I could pick one that I like more than the rest.
Okay, so as a quarterback, you can't do it all by yourself. You obviously need to have protection from your line, and you got to have some playmakers that are catching the ball, whether it's wide receivers or tight ends. what is the physical makeup that you like the most in a receiver?
I would probably say route running. I like to have the confidence in knowing where a guy's going to be. It gives me the ability to kind of anticipate a little bit and get the ball out on time and kind of trust that he's going to be in the right spot. I think that just makes both mine and his job a little easier.
What do you believe are your strengths? Describe in detail your strengths as a quarterback. Is it your arm strength? Is it your preparation? Is it your ability to get rid of the ball quick? Is it your ability to process the defense and what they're doing to you quickly?
Probably if I had to pick a couple, I would say, arm strength. I feel pretty confident in making all the throws. And, I think one of my biggest assets is just in my preparation, just mentally, knowing what the defense is doing, knowing where to go with the ball. I take a lot of pride in that. And, I try to be the smartest guy on the field, every time I play. What
part of the football creates the most pressure for you? Is it when your scoreboard is tilted against you, or what situation creates the most pressure for you?
Yeah, I think when you get down early in a game, that's tough because everybody, myself included, wants to press to make something happen. You may be trying to push the ball down the field when the check down was open. Running back may be trying to bust a big play when he really just needs to lower his head and get a few yards. When you get down, everybody's pressing to try to get you back in the game with one big play, when really you just got to convince yourself and the team, kind of stay calm, just keep chipping away at it. It's a 4-quarter game. You got a long way to go, but you got plenty of time to get there. I think it's just tough to stay in that mindset. That's kind of something that just comes with experience and playing a lot.
Obviously, this is the Pro Mindset podcast, and so I'm going to ask you a question about your mindset. What is your mindset and approach in game planning for Saturdays? What is kind of like your routine, daily routine, weekly routine in preparation for game day?
Yeah, so, early in the week, Sunday, Monday, get in and try to knock out all the base down stuff until I feel comfortable with that, kind of what they like to do on first down. And then as the week progresses, Tuesday, Wednesday, spend some time on third down. And then Thursday, I like to focus, strictly on the red zone as we get closer. I take a ton of notes. I fill up notebooks during the season. I don't know. I just feel like when I write things down, it helps me remember. So I go back on Friday, when we're done with walkthroughs and those things, kind of review my notes, and, I'll make note of certain clips that I want to go back and watch on Friday to make sure they're just fresh in my head before Saturday, and kind of go back and review everything. And, until I just feel solid about it. If we play later in the day on Saturday, I'll get up and kind of review a few things on Saturday. I don't want to stress myself out about it, but, like I said before, I don't think you can ever over-prepare.
Okay, Nick, you've played in offenses where you've broke the huddle and you've run up to the line of scrimmage. You've also been in no-huddle offenses. What has been your pre-snap thought routine before play? What are you looking at? What are you thinking? What is your checklist?
Yeah, so breaking the huddle, I had someone give me some advice when I was young, just to take a deep breath, because it kind of just slows you down a little bit. As a young player, you're worried about the play clock and getting everybody lined up and snapping the ball. You really got more time than you think. So make myself take a breath, look at the safeties first, because they kind of give you the structure of the defense, see if it's one high, two high, and kind of work my way down from there. Are the linebackers shifted one way or another? Can I expect pressure at 4 down, at 3 down? The corners press or off. Kind of just start at the top and work my way down, depending on the play call. And then, keep an eye on them. A lot of times, defenses these days, they move. Post they'll line up one way, and then line up too high, roll down one high after the snap. So, keeping your eyes up for those kind of things. But all that, the patience to see that stuff, it all comes with experience.
Nick, you as a quarterback, you get to be the hero or the GOAT. You get probably more credit than you deserve when you guys win, and more criticism and critiquing in the games that you guys lose. Let's talk about a situation where in a game you throw an interception. How do you respond after you throw an interception?
Yeah, I just, tell the guys my bad and move on. I think playing quarterback especially, you can't ride the waves of the game. If you throw a touchdown pass, you move on. If you throw a pick, move on. It's the long games. You're going to do good things and you're going to do bad things throughout the course of the game. And, being the leader and the voice and the guy everyone's looking to, I think it's really important to be even-keeled in the good times and the bad. Because, like I said, if you ride the waves of a game, so will everybody else. And when you're high, you're high. But when you're low, you're low. And it's kind of tough to get out of those spots. And you can kind of dig a hole for yourself. So I just try to stay pretty even-keeled through it all. And, good or bad, just be the same guy.
Similar to that is how do you handle after you get sacked? I mean, what do you say to your offensive linemen? You guys didn't huddle up, but, when you guys, let's say, for example, you get sacked, you got to punt the ball, you come off the sidelines, you see your offensive lineman sitting there on the bench. What is your interaction with an offensive line after they've not done their jobs and put you on your back and put your offense in a situation where they got to punt the ball?
Yeah, I try to just be encouraging, because at the end of the day, I'm going to one-hop a throw or sail one over somebody's head. The last thing I want is those guys turning around getting mad at me. So they're going to miss blocks. It's part of the game. They're going to get beat. I'm going to get hit. That's part of it. I'm not mad at those guys for that. So, I just tell them, keep working. It's okay. I'm not mad at you. I still love you. It's okay. And we move on.
Okay, Nick, I've never met a college player that didn't have a dream of playing in the NFL. And that dream typically doesn't start like last week. Guys, players that play football, it's usually they're watching games on Sundays, and they're little kids, and they have jerseys of their favorite players, and they start dreaming about the NFL when they're 4, 5, 6. When did you really start thinking about dreaming more than thinking about playing in the NFL?
You know what? I've always wanted to play in the NFL. I think that's been my dream since I was a kid. When I was in 7th grade, I'd have my parents drop me off at school every morning of the summer at 7 a.m. You go lift weights and throw. In my mind, that's always what I've wanted to be as an NFL quarterback. And it's, last season, being able to play well and get a little bit of attention has been very encouraging for me, kind of build my confidence up. And like you said, to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel that, this is a real thing. And, if I do what I'm supposed to do, I can make this happen. It's very encouraging and very exciting. But, it's always what I've wanted to do. If I make it that level, it'll be a dream come true. And, I'm excited to see where the rest of this year goes.
Your rookie year is coming up, Nick, and you're going to go to a team that's either going to have – everybody's got a little bit different quarterback room. Obviously – in New Orleans, you got 3 quarterbacks until free agency takes place here in about a month, actually a month from this week. What is your most desirable quarterback room situation? Do you want to go to a place that's already got an established guy so you can, do what Patrick Mahomes did, what Aaron Rodgers did, a lot of successful quarterbacks did? Or do you want to go to a place where there's really an unsettled quarterback situation and you have an opportunity to compete from the jump?
Yeah, I think there's positives to both. I think going into a team with an established guy, it's a great time for you to learn, like a lot of these guys have done, Aaron Rodgers. A lot of those guys, they go in, they learn for a couple of years from a great one, and they're able to take off a couple of years after that. But, obviously the competitor in me wants to play. People kill me all the time when they say the best job in the world is a backup quarterback. I think that's insane. If you're a competitor and you work hard, it's something you want to be playing. So I would love to have the opportunity to play from day one. I think that would be awesome, and I would feel ready for it. But, there's definitely pros to sitting behind somebody and being able to learn the game and learn how they do things. So, either one. I'd be happy either way.
Okay, so this year we've got Tua, Burrow, Herbert, Love, Eason, I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody. I'm expecting you to be the next guy after that top group. And I think you have just as much ability or more ability than some of those guys. What do you think sets you apart from all those guys, makes you better than all those guys, more attractive than those guys, and give you a better opportunity to be successful in the NFL? Even if the scouts don't know it, they're going to find out once you get there. What is that?
Yeah, being a quarterback, you're the face of the franchise. So I think the combine is a great opportunity to show teams that you can carry yourself in that way through your media interviews and your team interviews, handling yourself in a way that shows them the maturity and the ability to lead a team and a franchise in the right direction, say the right things and do the right things in front of the media, and then to be able to sit down and show them that you know the game and you can perform at a high level and you're ready to handle, being an NFL quarterback. I think that's the most important thing, and that's an area I feel, confident in, that I can show teams that, I'm ready to do that.
That's good, man. I'm going to pretend to be an NFL scout, and I'm at one of your games, and you have a good game. I'm back in my hotel room writing a scouting report on you. What are the typical things that you would expect an NFL scout to write about you, your performance factors, your characteristics that showcase yourself to their organization?
Yeah, hopefully the on-the-field stuff stands out enough. And then, I think the biggest thing they're going to notice is the way that I interact with my teammates and my coaches, and the way I lead and the way guys respect me and look to me. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway that they'll have, my attitude on game day and the way I approach every situation, good and bad. 1st and 10 to open the game or 3rd and 8 to win the game. I think they'll notice the way that I carry myself and the way that I try to lead the guys, both, on both sides of the ball. And just trying to be a constant voice and leader for our team and being a positive influence on everybody throughout the game, winning or losing. I think those are probably the biggest things they'll take away.
Okay, this is a question that I'm hoping lots of NFL scouts are listening. This is a question that the answer you give, I want these NFL scouts to know about you. What is your greatest asset in playing quarterback that the NFL doesn't even know about you yet?
Yeah, I think leadership, the ability to earn people's respect and being likable, I think that's very important as a quarterback. But also kind of who I am mentally, what I want from the game, the way I approach the game, my knowledge of the game. I think those are all things that, as hopefully they get to know me and evaluate me, they'll find and they'll really like.
Yes, sir. And again, everybody wants to get drafted as high as possible. I totally get it. More money, more security, more insurance, more reps. There's a lot of mores that come along with getting drafted higher. But Tony Romo didn't get drafted, and I think he did all right for himself. So how are you going to approach the NFL as a rookie differently if you're a first rounder, 3rd rounder, 7th rounder, or no rounder?
Yeah, it's a different approach. If you're taking in the 1st round, they probably want you to start the first game. If you're taking in the 3rd or 4th round, you're probably going to sit behind a veteran or an established guy. And those are a little bit different mindsets. But for me, my approach will be, like you said, handle myself like a pro and be ready to play. I've seen it plenty of times. Everybody has. The starter gets hurt before the season. The backup didn't think he was going to play, and all of a sudden he's the guy. So I think just preparing myself for that moment, whether I'm the day 1 starter or the 2, whatever it may be, just being ready to step in and perform whenever I'm given that opportunity. That would be my mindset, whether I'm taking in the 1st or the last round.
The NFL draft's coming up in a couple months. You're hoping to get your name called. I'm expecting you to get your name called, but it's a crazy animal. Sometimes guys get drafted in the 1st round and they only play for 2 years, and some guys don't get drafted at all or get drafted late in the 3rd day, and they go to the Hall of Fame. What is your best guess or suspicion for why some guys that get drafted as early as the 1st round end up being busts?
Yeah, I think a lot of it can be the timing and the organization fit, but also I think any scout would tell you that evaluating quarterbacks is just extremely difficult. And, even if a kid's talented, most of these guys are 21, 22 years old. It's tough to tell how mature they are and how much more they will mature. And are they going to handle themselves like a pro when they get in the building and they get $10 million? It's really tough to project all those things. And obviously, like you said, there's a high risk to it. A lot of guys have missed and a lot of guys have busted. But I think it's just the toughest position in sports to evaluate because a lot of guys can throw the ball well, but to play quarterback at a high level, mentally, I think that's where successful quarterbacks are made, and that's the toughest part to evaluate because those guys have 3 months to kind of figure that out in a couple interviews, and they can ask coaches and people that know them, but you're kind of just putting your best guess together and hoping that the guy is who you think he is, and that's just really tough to project.
Nick, you've had a very successful college career. A lot of that is due to your preparation and hard work. When you get to the NFL, what do you expect to be different in terms of your preparation, perhaps maybe even during the season?
Yeah, I think it's still it's still the same game. I'm still the same guy, and I feel like I prepare pretty well now. But obviously everything's ramped up. At that point it's your full-time job. There's no school. There's nothing else. I think you're in the building more and you prepare even more at that level, and I'm sure they have more resources and more data and everything is broken down on even another level. So I'm sure everything is taken up a notch. But no, it's still the same approach. Like I said, I've said it a couple of times, you can never over prepare, and I'll kind of take that same mindset into that situation.
You have some extensive experience in the pro style system. Who do you attribute that to? And how do you think that's helped you get ready for the next level?
It's pretty lucky to play so far for some couple great coaches. Well, first at Mississippi State, Dan Mullen. If you watch that offense on TV or watch film, it looks like a spread system, but really it's a pro style system made to fit the college game. The concepts and the run game and playing the quarterback position for him, it really translates directly into playing in a pro style offense. I think he does a great job of, getting the complexity of a pro style system into a language and a system that is simple enough for college guys to pick up and understand. So that was, obviously you look at the track record he's had with quarterbacks. It was great to learn from him. And my quarterback coach there, Brian Johnson, was amazing. He had a very successful career, and he's an extremely intelligent coach. And then, coming to UTC, Coach Arth and Justin Riscotti, Coach Arth was able to hang around the league for a few years. Riscotti won an FCS national championship at James Madison, and then, had a couple camp invites in the league. So both of those guys played the position at a high level. And, that was a true pro-style system. As a quarterback in that system, you have every type of read, progression reads, coverage reads. You're making all the IDs in protection, sliding the line where you want them to go, all the IDs in the run game, pointing out, who the line's working to, under center, shotgun, motions, shifts, different formations, different situations. We had it all. It was, our play sheet going into a game had 350 plays. They put a huge influence on watching NFL tape. Like we tried to model our offense after the Patriots. I watched more Patriots film in the last 2 years than, probably anybody else that doesn't play for them. So, that was an incredible learning experience for me. And, because to play in a system like that, you have to have a very good understanding of defense and what coverage structures and D-line alignments, linebacker alignments. If you don't know that stuff, you'll never get yourself into the right play, because we had a ton of checks and alerted plays. And if we get this look, we're going to run this. If we get this look, we're going to check to this. All those kind of things. So, for me, I feel like that gives me a leg up on almost every quarterback in the country, because just most people in college don't run that. College has just gotten away from that. So I feel like that experience prepares me as well as anything for playing the next level.
There's no question in my mind, watching you and getting to know you and seeing how you prepare, seeing how you attack the NFLPA Collegiate All-Star game, seeing how you're handling your business in Denver, training with your quarterback coaches. You are going to have a very successful NFL career, and I want to thank you for being on the show today. Thank you for listening to this episode of Pro Mindset. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. 5 stars, of course. You can follow us on our website, promindsetpodcast.com, or on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Pro Mindset Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you the next time.
Bread aisle, are you ready to rock? Dave's Killer Bread is the country's #1 organic bread for a reason. Always delivering killer taste, killer texture, and killer nutrition. This isn't bread. This is bread amplified.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.